With so many disturbing images of what's going on in the world, it's easy to become emotionally overwhelmed.
It absolutely is. And joining us now is Dr. Stuart Anfang. He's the chief adult outpatient psychiatrist at Bay State Medical Center, and he has tips on how to cope with a tragic event. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me here.
Thank you.
First of all, let's talk about how we can bring the subject up with our kids, because I feel as if almost every child out there has seen the footage or has heard about it being talked about now. So what do we tell them?
So that's a great point. And as you say, I mean, we live now in a 24/7 media stage. So, you know, people have seen a lot already. They've read a lot. They've seen a lot on television. And today, of course, is the first day back of school for a lot of kids. So they're going to talk about it in school. The first thing to know is you want to be age appropriate. So how you would talk to an 8-year-old is different than how you would talk to a teenager. You want to use language and images they understand. You want to validate that they may have anxiety, they may have fears, they may have a lot of questions. And you want to open up the discussion so that your child can feel free to talk about it, not sweeping it under the carpet.
And I feel like similarly, a lot of us have issues with it. We still have some coping to do, so we might be talking to our kids about it and telling them that everything's okay, but maybe it's not in our mind. So what do we say to ourselves? What do we say to our friends and colleagues?
It's a great question. In terms of the kids, it is true they're going to get their signal from you. So if you're feeling anxious and overwhelmed, and if you show it to your kids, they're going to get that same message. So how do we cope with these things? First of all, it's a tremendously horrific event. You know, it's hard to believe it's only been just a week ago today since that happened. So the first thing to recognize is how rare these things are, how random these things are, and to recognize that it's okay to feel traumatized by it. We're all traumatized by it. So that's a normal reaction. And we know that over time that will heal as we recover from it, as time goes by. People feel reassured knowing that the perpetrators or the alleged perpetrators are now in custody. But in the meantime, give yourself time to cope with it and to deal with it and to recognize you're upset, not just bury it.
And you, like you said, you just said that taking care of yourself is really important. One of the key things you could do. Mm-hmm. What are some other ways that you can do that?
Well, to take care of yourself, first of all, it's important to maintain your daily routine. Maintain the structure. If you go to work, if you're doing stuff at home, if you're doing things with your kids, you're going out to baseball games, try as much as possible to return to the normalcy of your life. Take care of yourself in terms of exercise, in terms of meals, in terms of getting good sleep, things like we always do to take care of ourselves. Watch your intake of alcohol and other drugs. Some people might find themselves drinking a little bit more during these kinds of things. You really want to be cautious about that and make sure that doesn't become a problem. Validate your feelings. Talk to other people about it. I mean, we as a community all throughout Massachusetts, all throughout the country, have shared this trauma, have been seeing this trauma. It's okay to talk about because you're not alone in your feelings. And the last thing I'd like to emphasize is there's a danger of being overexposed to the media. I mean, no criticism of the media, but we see it 24/7. You know, the same images go over and over and over again. People can become overwhelmed by that. So there's a point at which you've had enough information and you don't need to overload and overwhelm yourself by it. So those are some of the things.
Well, you tell us it's important to get back to our daily routines and re-assimilate ourselves to a way of living. It's also important that we take action too, and you know, we can do that politically, we can get involved in our communities. All these things are important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, people emphasize, of course, we don't know the details of what's going to come out, what we're going to learn about this. You know, and those are the kinds of things. Lately we've had a number of tragedies and people read all sorts of things into it in terms of what that might mean for policy or what that might mean for our decision makers. What's important to recognize is, at least first of all, how the community came together, how the first responders came together, how, you know, despite the terrible things that happened, we were able to come together as a community and reassure people that they can be safe again.
There are heroes all around. Thank you for being one of them and helping us talk about such an issue today, because we're all healing right now.
Thank you.
We're back with Dr. Stuart Anfang. He's the Chief Adult Outpatient Psychiatry at Bay State Medical Center, and he's taking your questions. Right now we have Corey on the line. Corey, you there?
Yep.
What's your question for us?
Hi, I have an 8-year-old son, and ever since the attack, he's been afraid to go out in public. I was wondering if you have any tips or anything I could say to him to comfort him at all?
So that's a good question. So, you know, how you would talk to an 8-year-old is different how you might talk to a 4-year-old or to a 16-year-old. So the first thing is you want to be age appropriate to what's going on. You may want to ask Corey some questions. What's going on? What are you worried about? Make it acceptable for him to talk about. Use the language that he talks about. Some children, particularly younger children, might find it easier to do drawings or to tell stories, whereas older children might be more able to describe it more clearly. If the son has gone back to school today, encourage him to sort of be with his regular routine. Maybe contact the school. The schools, a lot of them I know, have been gearing up to have this come up today at school, since it's been, you know, a week off for a lot of schools, and so they have counselors and other people ready to talk with the kids. The other thing is you don't want to sort of push your child. It's okay. It's okay for all of us for a day or two or so if you want to avoid places. But what you'd be concerned about is when it starts to cause more impairment for a longer period of time. So, for example, if he's not sleeping for days or not eating or crying a lot or very irritable, for a day or two, that might be understandable and you can reassure. But if it goes on for much longer, that might be a time where you would seek to contact a pediatrician or your own primary care doctor.
Well, and as we always say with some of our child experts, it takes a village to raise someone, and it's all about that communication. So as long as you can communicate with the teachers and with your child and maybe the extracurricular volunteers who are there, it's important that everyone's on the same page and geared towards the same goal of helping.
Absolutely, and there are a lot of resources out there actually on the internet. Excuse me, I know a lot of the school districts have put these things out. I know I got an email from my school district this morning. You can go on the internet. There are associations of school psychologists. There's the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. So there's a lot of information that gives tips about how to talk to your children depending on the different age involved. And you're exactly right. It does take a village, and it takes everyone knowing what's going on and how to approach. You know, the aspect of what's going on here is that we've all experienced this together, and of course we've experienced a lot of tragedies together, and we've overcome it, just like we've overcome 9/11 and other tragedies along the way. As a community, we will overcome this together.
And that's the resolve. We always seem to be able to keep going. Now, real quickly, we're very short on time, but if your child isn't experiencing any of these symptoms and maybe he looks okay on the outside or he doesn't want to talk about it, how do we know? Are there signs that might show us if he's not okay and maybe we should talk about it anyways?
So it's a good question. Again, you don't want to force the child to talk about it per se, but you want the child to know that it's okay to talk about it. Sometimes you might share your own feelings. You know, I've gotten anxious watching this on the news. You know, I've had trouble sleeping. Maybe you've had trouble sleeping. But if the child doesn't want to talk about it, I would sort of take the cue from the child. What you would be looking at is some of those signs we've talked about: problem sleeping, problem eating, crying a lot, irritability, a lot of sadness, a lot of withdrawal and isolation. Those are the things that you'd want to watch for if they go on more than a couple of days.
Well, Doctor, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here.
It's imperative that we have people like you chatting with us about these things to help get us through these situations.